Well, welcome everyone to another episode of the Iowa Gravel Series Podium Podcast. It's me, I'm Chris McQueen, and I'm here with an amazing guest, and kind of extra amazing because this is a person who has been on the podium, so we're keeping that rule, but they have not been yet on an Iowa Gravel Series podium. And so maybe if we really do our job well, we can figure out a way to get him out to one of our races. But this episode, we're doing something a little bit different. I've got Zack Isaacs from Movemint with me. He's the co-founder of Movemint. And he and his co-founder and his team are building the registration system that we're using. And it's fairly new. I mean, most of you are familiar with Bike Reg. That's where we've hosted our registration for a number of years. And then we've recently moved over to Movement for 2025. And so I thought it would be interesting if we brought Zack on. And I worried about this because I thought, wow, this is the first time we've ever had someone on that hasn't been on an Iowa Gravel Series podium. And so beforehand, I asked him, hey, have you ever been on a podium? And he said yes. And I'm like, great. That at least keeps us in the spirit of the podcast. And so we will ask him more about his 100-mile second place finish with 8,000 feet of climbing experience at Lost and Found a little bit later. Zack, it is so great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. It's great to be here.
All right, Zack. There are a few, like I said, there are a few questions that we should keep kind of standard, but I definitely want to talk quite a bit about movement in this. So let's start off with a question we always ask around, what got you into cycling? You are a cyclist. If you're watching the video, there are I count at least 3, maybe 4 bicycles blurred out in the background. So, and we know you ride, but tell us a little bit about how you became a cyclist.
Yeah, sure. I should say only 3 of these 4 bicycles are mine. The 4th is my girlfriend's, but yeah,
better. That is the right way to live your life. So you're doing okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I came by cycling honestly. My parents actually met on a bike ride in Rock Creek Park in Washington, D.C. And the story goes that my mom was the only woman on the group ride, and she was just laying it on the guys. And my dad was immediately in love. And so all growing up, it was all bikes all the time. I grew up in Oakland, California, where I still live. And we had really awesome access to mountain biking trails in the East Bay Regional Parks. And so I've been lucky to ride my whole life.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And I lived in the Bay Area for a little while. It is a fantastic place to ride. There's no shortage of road and mountain bike stuff. Lots of wonderful single track up in those hills. Have you ever had an encounter with a cow?
Yes, we have cows, especially in the Berkeley Hills. Thankfully, I haven't offended any cows. So they've always, we've always been able to go our separate ways without incident. But yeah, there are definitely many cow incidents.
Yeah, I just remember, I think there was the Dairy Farmers of America or something had a campaign a number of years ago. Maybe they still do. I don't know. But the team, there was a theme of happy cows, and every time I was up in the hills, especially much more on that Berkeley side, the I guess west side of the bay and everything, I just looked around and go, look, man, those have to be the happiest cows in the world.
Totally.
Great views. Okay, cool. So, but when did it go from hey, I ride my bike for fun, I'm a kid, to I think I might go and do a race? What shifted there?
Yeah. So when I was going off to college, I actually went to college a semester late because I was recovering from shoulder surgery. And so during that first fall semester, when I was not at college, when I was recovering, I worked at a bike shop, and it's called Mike's Bikes. It's now a pretty big chain, but there weren't as many of them back then.
Yeah, and I ended up getting my specialized tarmac was kind of secondhand from Mike's Bikes, but I know it had a Mike's Bikes sticker on it.
Yeah, so I worked at Mike's Bikes, but in addition to learning everything about bicycles, what was really cool was there was this guy named Nate English who was my coworker there, and Nate was sort of like the dominant local pro in the Bay Area at the time. Like he had the Mount Diablo KOM. He, was on the Kenda 5 Hour Energy team. So it was like a continental level team that would get, wild card invites to the Tour of California when that was still happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so being around Nate, I became infatuated with the sport, and Nate ended up becoming my coach. And so, from that point on, it was all bikes all the time.
Wow, sweet. So do you have, we mentioned the podium win, second place at the Lost and Found. What year was that?
That's a good question. That was during COVID. I think it was 2021.
Okay. What was it like? Were you aiming to get on the podium with that race?
I had never ridden it before, so I didn't really know what to expect, if I'm being honest. To be honest, I was kind of surprised that I got on the podium, because there was a pro category and then there was an open category, and there was no way for me to know who was in which category. And so I knew that I hadn't won the overall or come even close. I think I was like 15th or 20th overall. And so I was pleasantly surprised when they told me I got second. Yeah, but it was honestly an incredible experience and an incredible race. It was one of those races where, I was just so empty at the end that I was like almost emotional, because I had just given everything possible to the race. And there were a ton of friends there. Most of them had done the shorter course, and so they were all there at the finish line when I crossed, and so it was just awesome to celebrate with all my friends.
That is one of the many ways to define like a great day in the saddle is being able to have those experiences. Tell me a little bit about the terrain, like where you mentioned 8,000 feet of climbing, but like and gravel, but like what kind of was the general motif of the route? One big or a couple big climbs, one rollers, like kind of paint us a picture of what kind of race it was.
Yeah, there were a few sustained climbs that were like 20 to 30-minute climbs along the way. But in between the big climbs, I just remember feeling like nothing was flat at all. It wasn't super technical. It was pretty fast course. I want to say that, like my time, I think it was close to 6 hours maybe. So it was a pretty fast course. Maybe it was 6.5. I honestly don't remember. But yeah, it was just pretty fast rolling fire roads and double track. Not only one pretty technical descent, but for the most part, you could just fly over everything as fast as you could pedal.
What was your nutrition like? What's your philosophy on nutrition for like something like that, like a big? And maybe you learned some lessons. Like maybe what was your nutrition technique, and now what would it be going into something like that?
Yeah, I eat a lot on the bike. So I don't count carbs, which I know is the hot thing to do these days. But I'll generally go for 1 to 2 items per hour. So if that's a gel and a sleeve, those gels usually have 100 calories, and the goos or the cliffs often have 200, and so I usually try and go for about 300 an hour.
Nutrition in the bottle, keep it out of the bottle, keep the electrolytes only. What's kind of your thoughts there?
Yeah, I've tried. I generally will put electrolytes in the bottle, but not too many calories. I've tried some of the higher carb mixes from Scratch and others, and I find that I just have a lot of trouble digesting those for some reason. And so, the thing, like when you're full up on nutrition and you feel like you just can't take any more of the high calorie mix, all I want is water in those cases. And so I tend to just eat my food instead of drink it.
Yeah. I always love asking the nutrition questions because it just depends. And I think for me, it always brings back the idea that like you have to just experiment with stuff, listen to your gut, figure out how your body is. It changes over time. Like a couple of years ago, I discovered that apparently I can eat Oreo style Little Debbie cosmic brownies with no indigestion, no challenges, and I can just pound those suckers like no problem. And each one of them so tiny. I think they're like 300 calories. They have like almost 100 grams of carb per little bar. I think maybe they're 80. It's insane. Like
Yeah.
anybody eating those outside of a high endurance, multi-hour effort, I'm like, you better just go for a walk, because you're gonna have just a straight sugar rush. Your pancreas is just not going to know what to do with all of that right away. But they're fantastic. They're fantastic on the trail.
I do think
so
that,
anyway.
Yeah, I do think that gas station candy is underrated. I think that we give too much credit to Goo and Cliff. That's a hot take, but I think that Sour Patch Kids and jelly beans, I feel like they're 95% as effective as like Clip Blocks.
I agree. At the same time, I'm very grateful for our sponsors, Hammer, and we've worked with folks like Carb, and I really do love Hammer stuff. Like I use it all the time in training and everything. So don't get me wrong. I think you're right. They definitely do have a place. I think when it comes to when you're just like, I have to get as many carbs in me as possible, and I don't need to be strategic about it. Like I think actually training with something like Hammer or Scratch or something like that is actually probably smarter. And then just all things go out the window, all bets, when you're going for the real thing, you're like, you can give yourself some leeway to be a trash panda, as I like to call it. But
totally.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet. We got a little bit of the regular stuff on. Let's kind of move over to Movement. I know that you previously worked at Strava, so there's some history there. Movement is only 2 or 3 years old at this point?
Yeah, it depends how you count. I started writing code for the events product 13 months ago.
Okay, all right. So we'll call it a year.
Sure.
So it's pretty new. So kind of take us back. Like, where did the idea of Movement come to you? What was it where you're like, I think I need to build this?
Yeah. I think that a lot of the inspiration, it came from my perspective working at Strava, and it also came from my perspective as an athlete. So when I was working at Strava, one of the two really cool things I got to work on was I got to start our API team. And I was not the visionary for the API team. My boss was, but I wrote all the code for it. And this crazy thing happened where for the first year or so, we would go to all these different companies, and I would have to beg them with my boss to upload to Strava. So like I'm talking like Zwift, Peloton, even Garmin with photos and other things. Like every connected partner under the sun, we would actually sometimes even like write their code for them. And then this amazing inflection point happened where customers started demanding that those companies integrate with Strava, and then our job was done and we started working on other things. But I think that, what I learned is that there's tremendous power in having a connected solution. And so if you think about Strava, and its atomic unit is the activity, and everything revolves around the activity. And Movement, like the atomic unit is the event. And there's pros and cons to each one, but I think that there's a tremendous amount of power in having a platform that celebrates and centers around the event, because events happen obviously a lot less frequently than activities, but they're much higher intent moments. And so, and there's also just so much joy around these events, and there's so much lore around each individual event that I love, that I just thought it would be fun to create this. And then, also just from an athlete perspective, I've signed up for 1 million bike races, a few running races, and I always felt like, without naming names, that like you go onto these sites and it feels like you're on Craigslist or something. And I just felt like the endurance community deserved better. And I felt like the endurance community deserved a platform that actually captured the magic of these events. And like, it's like why you have this podcast. It's like there's magic in these events, and I wanted Movement to capture that.
Well, that's really cool. Okay, so the goal is to capture that magic. If perfectly captured as 100%, what is your percentage point at this point? If you had to kind of rate yourself on the 100% magic to 0, there's no magic. It's worse than Craigslist. It's those old, like, I don't know if you ever used some of the early email software that was back in the 90s. I might be dating myself, but there was definitely no magic in some of those things. But yeah,
I'd say we're at the very beginning of the journey. Like, I would love to say, yeah, we're at 85%, but I honestly think that we are, at parity and have surpassed many of our competitors in really specific ways. But I think that's just like the tip of the iceberg. I think that there's so much more to go. So I would say we're honestly at like 10%.
okay, that's fine. I mean, that's you have to figure out where you are and then figure out where you're going. And I would agree. In some ways, I'm going to tell you where I think you're a little bit higher than 10% in my mind, and that is with series integrations. Like the fact that like I never had, like, I have to set up a bunch of races because I have 7 races, or we have the Iowa Gravel Series board and everything, but I'm generally setting these things up. We have 7 races in this series, and to have like basically to go through and like set these things up each time and everything, like it takes a bit. And there were some wonderful things that you guys did in terms of duplicating events to make it very easy, that yes, other platforms have. But then it was, very self-serve for me, where I'm like, okay, yeah, and these races are a series. Boop, I hit a checkbox basically, or I hit a button, and I said, yep, pick this race, or this race. This is part of the series. Here's the price. Off you go. And like that process, like one part of it I couldn't even do with previous registration folks. And the little bit of work that I could do there, or a little bit of facilitation I could do there, basically required reaching out to support and figuring out how they were going to do it. And there was a lot of kind of manual setup on their part, and I never felt like I was really in control of it. So for me, being able to have like a number of races and kind of link them together and do interesting things is, I think, a huge game changer. I think there are areas that we've talked about, and maybe we can dip into those a little bit more. But tell me a little bit before we kind of get into like the future of the platform. Tell me how this growth has been over the last 13 months or so, because if you started writing code in November of 2023, somewhere around there, like you've got a lot of races and series up there. So who else is on Movement? Who's as crazy as the Iowa Gravel Series?
I'm very fortunate that there are many people who are as crazy as you are. In the cycling space, and specifically in gravel, we've seen all sorts of events come on to Movement that I have done, many of them, and that I admire. So races like Rock Cobbler, the Grasshopper Adventure Series, which by most people's account is like the first gravel series, period. We won Bighorn, which is a series of 2 events in Colorado. We just last week announced Vermont Overland, which is another big one. So it's amazing. It's like all these races that I've done and that I love, and I can't believe that I get to work with the people who put them on. It makes me really giddy.
That's really cool. What do you find is kind of similar? Who seems to be naturally attracted to Movement from a race director standpoint? Like who's kind of buying into this vision, and what is it that they, what is it that they're like, oh yeah, let's do this?
That's a good question. I think it depends. On the organizer, because I think especially for gravel, there's one set of features that people care about, and these gravel races, they tend to have a series component, and so people care a lot about marketing and communications. They're also a little bit higher price tag, and so enabling people to use their phones and have it feel like a primo experience for a more expensive event, that matters. But what matters to certain smaller organizers who might have, 1 to 3 races is totally different than what matters to, some of our other customers. So we have other customers like Tracksmith is one of our customers. It's a brand, and they have events literally all over the world. Their average event size is like 1,000. It's crazy. And so what we provide for them, and this is coming back to my API roots at Strava, is I built an API so that when you sign up for a Tracksmith event on Movement, we actually send them the information about your registration, and then they can put you into their Klaviyo, is what they use for email marketing, to like send you your confirmation email, make sure it looks super beautiful and like Tracksmith. And so there's different things for different people.
Yeah. And can I share mine?
Yeah, I would love to hear that.
Well, I've always shared, and this might be a little future looking because I know we've had some conversations. So you might have to qualify some of these on like, will this happen? So I'll try and be careful with what it is. So I've already mentioned series, like the fact that it feels like it is designed to very well support. Like if you have a series of events, you're going to be able to see all of those, and that's great for me. I'm actually, and I agree with you that like the event is kind of that atomic unit, but I also think that like the racer profile is an interesting thing there. So tell me, I will paint probably not completely accurately like what I think like the perfect racer profile will be, and I'm curious like how close you think this might, where we are right now, and how close we might get to that in the future. But for me, much like Strava, you've got this profile and you kind of see what people have been doing, and you can kind of get an idea like what kind of athlete this person is. It's great for, stalking your potential rivals on a race and everything, but also motivating each other and going like, oh yeah, I should ask this guy how this race is, or I should ask this person, this woman, what it was like to do that. It allows for just this transparency that can be kind of lonely in endurance sports, whether you're running or cycling. The racer profile, I wanted to kind of be similar as well. Give you an idea of like, all right, here's how someone's really stacked up over time in this series, like, or in these races, a little bit more of a trophy case in some cases. But also, I don't know, like maybe that trophy case is I don't want it to be like I wouldn't think of it as, necessarily like medals and awards and super graphic, but like where you can kind of see like these are some of the best days that they've had, or maybe some of the worst days, and the things that they've pushed through, and being able to look back on that as a racer and go, oh yeah, here's what I accomplished. Not just like all the mass stuff, all the stuff that stacks up from Strava, but like kind of these key moments and capturing that. So I'm curious, I definitely would love like points, being able to award points to racers and have some control there, to say, all right, yeah, this is how someone stacks up in the race over time, over a number of years. Those are things I think about. But so how close am I? What's kind of the current vision and the current state of racer profiles on Movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could have described our product almost to a T, minus the score. Like when you sign up for a race on Movement, we don't require that you create a profile, but you can optionally do that. And if you do have a profile on Movement, we automatically link all of your results and all of your upcoming events to your profile, and you can see really easily in one place what all your results are. It links to all the events. You can also manage your registration, do things like transfer it to a friend if the organizer has enabled that. You can see your merch, your receipt, like there's a million things. And I think that fun social component of like predictive scoring is probably something we'll get into. I'll be honest that it's not something that's currently on our roadmap, but you're not the first person who's brought it up. And I know that people love their scores. Like on ultra sign up, people, which is for ultra running, like what Bike Reg is for cycling, people love their ultra sign up scores. And I feel like there's some magic in being able to maximize your number.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if like how much of that can be fed from like a Strava integration as well, in terms of saying, well, we know you've trained this much and what you've been doing, and so we kind of get a sense how much people will want to telegraph that. I don't know. I hadn't thought about it necessarily that way. I was more of like, okay, what's my stack rank in this series? Because as a director, I want to make something valuable so people come back. It's a lot easier for me to plan and to make a really good event if I have a general idea of like how many people I'm going to have each time. And it makes it a lot easier for me to get sponsors. So selfishly, as a race director, I don't need, it's Iowa. We don't have, I think Iowa's population is like 3.5 million people or something like that. That's, that's not even the population of New York. We're not highly, a dense market or anything. So I don't necessarily need thousands of people on a race, but I do want consistent racing over the years and to maintain a number so that I can, provide a good event and market that to both other racers, grow appropriately, get better sponsorship deals and everything. So I definitely want something that feels, sticky and gives it some meaning. I think the points, which we kind of tried to do in 2024 and we didn't really get there. It's something that I'm really excited for 2025. To do a better job there with the points that you might earn from a series and who is that series winner.
Yeah, I'm excited to make that a reality with you. If there's one thing I learned how to do at Strava, it's make a leaderboard. So let's do it.
There we go. No problems there. Okay, and API stuff. So that's the other area where I'm really interested. And this is going to get very geeky very quick. So I apologize for the folks listening at home who have zero interest or actually understanding or knowledge of what an API is. So I'll let you're the expert. How do you describe what an API is to someone? If you go to a dinner somewhere and someone's like, I have no idea what an API is. How do you describe an API to someone?
That's a good question. Well, it stands for Application Program Interface, and interface is really the important word there. And it's what allows Movement to share your data with Strava, for example, or it's what allows you to sign in with Google to any service on the internet. And so that's what an API is it enables one company to share information with another with your consent.
Yes. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to hopefully have, I haven't dug into Movement's API yet. I've been just kind of using the tools that are there for right now, but like, I spend an enormous amount of time each year exporting a CSV file, doing something with it in Excel or Google Sheets, usually Google Sheets, just because it's often faster and I don't have to, anyway. And then exporting that CSV into another system somewhere else. And I will tell you, if I never saw a CSV again in my life, I would be fine. Like I would be okay. And it's not that that's bad. It takes time. It's always a snapshot of that data. And then the minute that snapshot is done, within minutes, possibly that data is out of date. And so there's this constant timing of things to make sure I'm doing it at the right time. And it means that it means less time that I get to spend with my family and less time to do the things that I really love to do, which is have conversations with folks like you, or go out and figure out how to, talk to sponsors, or, make sure the logistics and everything for the event are in order, because I'm over here exporting and importing CSVs. So for me, there's a few providers that we use. We use Race Result for our timing stuff. I think you've mentioned that there's some integrations that you're looking to do there.
Definitely.
Yeah. So if you use Race Result as your timing, that could be easier. I don't know how much you want to share or share at this point, but
it's okay. We're actively working on it, so I'm happy to share. I think what you're getting at is that there's like most timers. You're an organizer and a timer because you now own timing equipment because we've talked about it. But most timers spend an inordinate amount of time taking data from companies like Movement, the registration data, and then putting it into the scoring platform so that you can actually know, when you cross the line, like who that is. And then on the back half of the race, they also have to spend a ton of time going from scoring to results. And so it's all this manual crappy work of like renaming columns and reformatting timestamps into Unix or whatever. And it really is the perfect thing for a computer to do for you. And so
Yes.
we're working on an integration so that timers can more easily get data from registration to scoring and scoring to results.
Yeah. And that I don't know where the cockles of someone's heart are, but they warm. Like the cockles of my heart are warmed by the idea that maybe, I can essentially push a button or fewer buttons and know that everything for my event is all going to be set up nicely. And if I do it once well and set up the way I want it, it's more automated from there. The other one, and I don't know if you want to share this, is this idea of, I do work in Google Sheets quite a bit. Is that still something that is kind of on the roadmap of integrating with Movement?
Yeah, we are going to do that. We've actually made a lot of progress on the most important intermediate step for that in the last week. And so what we did was we can now enable you to filter all of your participants any way you want. Like if it's by sub-event, which for you is grassroots in the lunch and t-shirt option, or by gender, by age, whatever you want. And then you can select which fields you want to export, because oftentimes organizers will just want, name and email, or, maybe they just want merchandise counts or whatever. And so that's setting us up also for the Google Sheets integration so that, right now there's a button to export that stuff as a CSV, but right next to it, it'll be like export to Google Sheets. And so those are the two integrations we're working on.
It is, and it's
okay.
It is,
we're gonna do them both, so.
it is so exciting to me because I use, we use Race Result for timing, and they've got some fantastic stuff, but you nailed it exactly. I spend a lot of time renaming columns each time, because the way I get the data out, and I've got some Google Apps script that I run to kind of like clean some things up and everything, but invariably something changes and then it breaks because it's a new file. And it's a lot. I'm tech adjacent. I am not, an engineer by practice. So a lot of this stuff is a bit of a heavy lift for me. So the idea that I might be able to just have a Google Sheet that essentially expresses, all right, here's who I need to make sure has a lunch ticket for the Silver City Century, and not have to export that CSV at just the right time in between registration closing and our online or our same day registration opening. Does a lot of great things for me. Okay, well, very, very cool. What else? Is there anything else that, like, if you had the opportunity to talk to a race director or even to a racer, what else would you share about Movement that you think is helpful for them to know, that people tend to kind of perk up and say, oh, that's interesting?
Yeah, I think for race directors, the biggest difference with us versus competitors is that we take care of a lot more than just registration. So over and over, race directors will come to Movement and they'll be on different systems for registration, email marketing. They might have a separate solution for text messaging. They definitely have a separate one for e-commerce in their store. And then they'll often have one or two others. They might even have one for volunteers as another one. And when you come to Movement, you get all that stuff baked in. So your event page is the hub for all those different functions. And so it makes it really easy for you, because you can just send everyone, people who are interested in volunteering, people who are interested in just donating to your race or buying your merch. People can buy your merch or volunteer without actually signing up for your race, which I was surprised to learn when I got into this industry is actually a differentiator for us. And so people can do that stuff. And so that's what I'd say for the race director is that you can stop paying $100 a month to MailChimp and Shopify and just use us. And to the athletes, I would say, we just want to make a delightful experience from the time you sign up to the time you cross the finish line. And, we are not solely responsible for that. Like, most of it is on your shoulders as the race director, but
I take that responsibility. Like I'm going to do my best, I can't just outsource that to you. That's my job.
But if we can support that magic in a meaningful way, then we're going to do it.
Yeah. And speaking of support, like that has been one of the, as we've kind of gone through this transition, the opportunity that I had to, reach out to your team. We got to go and have some fries at the pier in the Bay Area, because I happened to be out there for work, which was delightful, meeting the whole team. And you let me babble on about all the fun things that are Iowa and the gravel race. You're just very kind, and it was a fun evening with you all to be out there. And so but more importantly, you've been really, really responsive on all the crazy emails that I've sent you. Said, hey, what about this? Where are these things? So it's been just kudos to you and the team on how supportive you've been to me as a race director. So thank you, because it's hard. It's hard at times to do this, and I really appreciate the level of support that you've provided and the care.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's honestly like what I am most excited to do every morning is to work with people like you. So it's mutual.
Sweet. Well, cool. Then I'll keep sending you my bug requests and my feature requests.
Hopefully the ratio of feature requests to bug requests will increase with time.
Yeah, no, it's been pretty good.
Bugs.
I think. Yeah. I feel like when I do find a bug, I'm kind of like, ooh, sweet. I get to share this with the team. I feel like I'm getting to be part of the team, which I love. So that's great. All right. So there's a few other things that we could go into, but I think we might leave it for there, only because the others are more drama and stuff around I feel like this transition has been good, but at the same time, it's been a real challenge for me, knowing that there are going to be people who only know to look for Iowa Gravel Series bike races on Bike Reg. And I want to be very clear that I have great esteem for Athlete Reg and Bike Reg and the platform that they've provided and everything. They've been a great partner. This is in no ways like us moving to Movement, something where I think they did something wrong or anything, but I want to point out there are so many things that you have, the things that we've talked about already that you've done really right. And so looking forward to more of that. So I'll leave it there. Just that hopefully people hear this and listen to this podcast and know that we're on Movement and that it's a good thing, and they don't get upset that it's not on Bike Reg, because we tried to put it on Bike Reg as well, just in case people couldn't find us, but that got tricky, and I don't want to go and stir any nets up, stir anything up or create any drama or anything. That's not the goal, but we did try to both have the event on Movement and Bike Reg, and that quickly became something that was not possible. Mm-hmm. Despite our desires and the work that we put into it. So yeah, but that's okay.
Yeah, come on over to Movement. The water's fine.
There we go. There's the invitation. If you go and if you buy me a Diet Dr. Pepper, maybe I'll tell you the story somewhere if anybody's listening. So we can have that conversation. No ill will, but just a little challenging and different folks' policy.
Yeah.
So let's kind of move back over to the athlete thing and then kind of wrap up. Do you have any races or major things that you have planned for 2025? Are you just all Movement all the time and your fitness is going to deteriorate drastically?
I mean, honestly, that's the case right now. I'm in the worst shape that I've been in my adult life. But I'm also, if I'm being honest with you, it's completely because of Movement, but I'm also the happiest I've ever been, because I feel like I'm able to do my best work, which means a lot to me personally. But you know, with all these cool races coming online, yeah, I'm super motivated to get back in shape. I see all these races and I'm like, oh my God, I need to get off the couch if I'm going to have a shot at finishing this thing. Maybe next time I can be like, if you can reward the Lantern Rouge or something, and I can be back on this podcast. But I'm not going to be at the front anytime soon. I think for now, I would just like to finish these things.
That it makes sense. As someone who's built, some things, not exactly like what you're doing, but I do hope that you do find some balance to keep that mental health going. And if that's on a bike, great. Whatever it needs to be, I do wish you the best. I don't want you to waste away trying to build this startup, which it's challenging. It's you've got a team, you've got a life. I can't remember if you're married. Oh yeah, you did. You said your wife. Yeah, you've got a family. Like these are important things that you have to take care of. So.
Yeah, it's true.
If there's any way that I could help finance a way for you to come out to the Iowa Gravel Series or something like that, let's talk.
I'll come by my own volition. I went for an awesome ride in Iowa once, like a gravel ride.
Where? What?
I went. I was actually before this call looking to see if it was close to any of your courses, but it was in Kellogg. Have you ever been there? Kellogg, Iowa?
I'm somewhat familiar with Kellogg. I'm bringing up my maps here. I'm more familiar with Kellogg, Michigan, but
I went for a little loop around Kellogg in 2020, and my title, and I didn't change it for this interview, it was completely blown away by Kellogg, Iowa. It was awesome.
Because we did talk about it. It's in between Newton and Grinnell, and so it's over in kind of the east side of the state. It's just off of I-80. I remember we did talk about this. Mm-hmm. And the crazy thing to me is that if you were blown away with Kellogg, the fact that there are at least 2 to 3 other versions of Iowa gravel out there that you might be able to find. Or that we could put you on and everything. So if you enjoyed Kellogg, and I have been out near Grinnell in that area, I think we got some lovely surprises for you that would maybe also blow you away.
What's your favorite
what's my what?
What's your favorite version of Iowa gravel?
What's my favorite version of Iowa gravel? So I grew up out west, and so for me, I love to climb. I'm not a small guy, but I'm also not a big guy. Like I'm not a strong climber beyond the fact that I can just climb for a long time, and I like that type of work or on the bike. And so I do tend to enjoy the Luss Hills and the Driftless region. We joke a lot in Iowa that Iowa's flat as a waffle. So I mean, it's constant rollers. Like if you want a hill, you can find a hill. It just tends to be a little bit shorter, and that took me a little while to figure out how to pace myself appropriately or build up the right level of like quick fitness to kind of power up a hill and then recover quickly. It's just a different style of fitness and riding. So I like a little bit longer climb if I can. I love turns, which can be a little bit rare in Iowa. It tends to be, thanks to the Louisiana Purchase and the Homesteading Act and everything, it tends to be on a bit of a grid. So I do tend to look for like windy roads. And although if you looked at Iowa for the most part, you would think it doesn't have any windy roads. They're out there, and we've picked some good routes on there. But my favorite time of year, actually, I think is what's important with gravel, is because through the year it changes, and man, there's nothing quite like spring gravel and late fall gravel, because in the middle of the summer is when the secondary roads teams go out and they lay the fresh gravel, and that's a little tricky. So you can get some really smooth where you're like, is this pavement style of gravel, which is kind of fun.
Nice. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. It's changing. It's a beautiful place. The sunsets are beautiful. The farmland is beautiful. The sounds. One thing I did notice coming from California is how noisy Iowa is from a wilderness standpoint.
I feel like it's like that Yeah, I remember that actually. I remember because I was camping at the time. It was super loud. And I remember seeing coyotes and deer. It was really cool.
Yeah. So that's the other part of it, is like just the smells and sounds and just the visceral nature of being out there in the gravel is kind of my favorite. But so you'll just have to come and experience it again with us sometime if we can make it happen.
I think that's in my future. Yeah. Maybe the easiest one.
All right. Yeah. Well, they're all easy to someone. Let's kind of wrap this up. There's one question that I often ask, and it's the magic wand question. I'm curious. You've been in the cycling industry for a while, both Strava and now Movement, and you've been a racer. If you had a magic wand, something that you could be like, oh man, if I could just change this with gravel, it's like, what might it be? Do you have anything that's kind of top of your list of like, man, we could just make this different?
Yeah, I think that if I could wave my magic wand, I think I would make it a more tangible career for young people and young racers to actually make a living out of gravel cycling. I know that
Like
that's
as a racer, as a promoter, as a racer, so more gravel cycling racing. Yeah.
I mean, I know that only is applicable to a few people, but I just feel like the pros in cycling, especially, just give me so much inspiration, especially gravel pros, and they receive very little relatively in return. And I know it's cool, like they get to like ride their bike and go to all these races for free, but it's still really hard for them to make ends meet. And so I think it would be cool if that was a more sustainable career path for our brightest young guns.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think? What do you imagine that there's anything that would actually unlock that in some way? Just your opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's funny. Like the thing that I was working on before we pivoted to events, I was working on other software and we stopped doing it. But what I was working on, I think would be great, which was a GoFundMe for athletes. I think that like crowdfunding sponsorship could be pretty powerful there.
Yeah, I think so too. The other area that I think about that, and this kind of maybe my bias only because I've done a lot with like video, well, not professionally, but I've been around cameras and video production and mostly for training sort of stuff. But I think the ability to watch and spectate in gravel racing and some of these things is tricky. But as we get closer with drones and more internet in all places and things like that, I do wonder if it makes it easier for folks to spectate more. We've had a group here, the Hogback gravel race. They live streamed their entire race kind of with basically, I don't know, a couple drones and someone sitting in a control booth somewhere. Like, I don't know exactly how old they did it, but it wasn't quite at the level of like what you see with like Lifetime Fitness and some of their race movies that they've put together, sort of thing. But it was really cool and showed that like with a little ingenuity and some knowledge, like those are some things that you could do it. So I wonder sometimes if like that ability to get people into the race and enjoy it secondhand, almost, like watching a good football game, we could do something there as well. So
yeah, cool. I think there's definitely a lot there.
Yep. Well, Zach, this has been a fantastic evening chatting with you. I hope we get to do it again sometime. And anything you'd share with us before we wrap up?
Just looking forward to a great 2025 Iowa Gravel Series. Yeah, thanks for your support. And yeah, I'm sure I'll talk with you probably later this week about whatever we have cooking.
Perfect. Yeah, all right. Looking forward to it. Yep, looking forward to it as well. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks for having me.